Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the April 20th meeting of the Granville Exempted Village School District Board of Education. It is 6:33, and please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Nice to see such a full boardroom.
Yeah.
So I was going to say on a gorgeous day, but it's really not so nice out. Take your roll, please.
Dr. Corman?
Here.
Ms. Deeds?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Dr. Rantel?
Here.
And Mr. Janice is absent today. Okay.
Accommodation.
Excellent. I'm glad all of you could be here for my 2-hour dissertation on Granville's. Just kidding, just kidding. This month we are going to be looking backwards at some winter sports and commendations, including our state competitors in wrestling, indoor track, bowling, and competition cheerleading. We're going to start by recognizing 2 GHS wrestlers that competed in the Division II state meet last month. Christian Price placed 8th to become only the 2nd wrestler in Granville history to place at the state tournament. Luke Mendocino became the 4th underclassman and only the 2nd sophomore in GHS history to compete in the state wrestling championships. Congratulations on a great wrestling season. If Christian and Luke are here, I don't know, I didn't see them. They're probably wrestling. Next, we're going to recognize our indoor track athletes who competed at the indoor state track meet in Akron. Michaela DeGennaro is Granville High School's latest state champion after her victory in the 1,600 meter run, which was a school record. The girls team placed 3rd overall. Also setting school records were Natalie Price, who took 2nd in the 400 meter dash and 5th in the 60 meter dash. Claire Lamb, who took 4th place in the 1,600 meter run, and Alyssa Atkinson, who took 8th place in the 3,200 meter run. In addition, the girls 4x400 meter relay took 3rd place. Those runners were Natalie Price, Destiny Braden, Cassidy Carey, and Michaela DeGennaro. And the 4x800 meter relay team took 8th place. Those runners are Destiny Braden, Riley Bruck, Maddie Long, and Ellie Dickerman. All of these girls earned All-Ohio status at the meet. If any of the runners are here tonight, they usually are running all the time, so they might be out running. Anybody? All right, I know we're going to have some. Next, we have Granville High School student Carly Eggleton, who represented our district at the state bowling finals last month. She rolled a 457 and finished 66th. Congratulations to Carly, and I heard that this is without bumpers, you know? And that's the only way I bowl. So, Carly and your coach Sue, please come on. Let's take a picture, photo op. Which way do you want us to step over? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that you would do it.
That's all right.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have the Granville High School competition cheerleading team that took 3rd place in the Division II non-mount at the state cheerleading competition. You guys might have to explain that to me. You know, obviously the senior leaders are representing the team tonight. Please come up to the podium. Brooke Murphy, Madeline Schneid, Victoria Wright, Kelsey Mall, and Chloe Payne. Congratulations, girls. we want to stand right there? Okay.
Do you want me to scoot more?
All right, congratulations. I was hoping that we'd form a pyramid or something, but, you know, I know I would be the weak link. I know I'd be the weak link. Thank you to our high school winter sports athletes and representing GHS with pride. I appreciate all of your efforts. Next, we have our Granville Middle School wrestlers who had a strong showing at the Division II state tournament in Youngstown, placing 3rd overall. This tournament is a tough one because there's only 1 division at the state level for middle school compared to 3 in the high school. So making it to state is a huge accomplishment. GMS was represented by qualifying wrestlers Douglas Terry, Zach Walsh, Brandon Haley, Keegan Van Meter, Jackson Stephanie, Max Markgraf, and Joey Rutherford. At the end of the week, GMS had 1 man standing on the podium, only the 2nd person to do so in GMS wrestling history. Congrats to Keegan Van Meter, placing 6th. Terry, Hallie, Van Meter, and Stephanie all had winning records. Of these 4, 3 were eventually beaten by people who placed in the competition. On behalf of the board and the coaching staff, thanks to all the boys and parents for making this a memorable season. Congratulations, and please bring your coaches up as well. And I need 1 more. Can you grab it up? Now, let's move into the center here so that Beth can take a picture. It's a larger group. Joey, get up. Come on.
No, I just.
All right, real quickly, weight classes.
164, 146, 438, 132, 205.
Okay, awesome. Now, guys, I have to admit, my dad was a wrestling coach for Euclid High School for many years in the 70s and 80s. So, you know, punishments when I did happen to misbehave included a wrestling match. So I knew what a double grapevine was from a very early age, and I think that is illegal now, and I'm glad. So, all right. Next, we are going to commend 2 Granville teachers who were honored with awards just last week. The first one, GHS Environmental Science teacher Jim Redding, received the Outstanding Environmental Education Award from the Environmental Education Council of Ohio at their awards banquet at Maumee Bay State Park. Jim was nominated by Denise Brooks, Acting District Program Administrator and Environmental Education Specialist for the Licking Soil and Water Conservation District. The award goes to an outstanding environmental educator in the field of formal education and is given to multiple levels, preschool through high school, and even college teachers, for an outstanding contribution to the environmental education in Ohio. This award could not go to a more deserving person in Jim Redding. I don't know if you see him out in front of GIS regularly, but he is always out in the field at the new land lab. And he coordinated the prescribed burn the other day, which was quite something to watch. So Jim, you've done a fantastic job, and this is well-deserved. Come on.
It's got a red.
Apparently it's counting.
Oh,
I
no.
must have pressed the wrong button. 2 and
Be ready.
perfect.
All right. Congratulations. And last week, we surprised 5th grade teacher Leslie Hopping in her classroom at Granville Intermediate School to present her with the Leaders for Learning Award from the Licking County Foundation. In the nomination, Principal Gail Burris said Leslie's mission as a classroom teacher is for all of her students to reach their full potential. She takes time to build meaningful relationships with her students, getting to know their personal interests and incorporating those into her instruction, while encouraging her students to do their best. I agree with Mrs. Burris that Leslie is committed to her profession and takes on leadership roles in collaboration with her colleagues. Leslie Hopping is an educator who truly cares about her students, and through her commitment to education has a huge impact on the quality of our education and what her students receive. Congratulations, Leslie. Well deserved.
No, they got none.
That seems really close up.
I know.
Congratulations to all of our award winners tonight. This is probably my favorite part of the board meeting. No offense. And I know that you guys share that sentiment. If you have just received an award and you want to leave at this point, it will not hurt our feelings. We know that you have a lot of things to do tonight. But you're welcome to stay for the rest of the board meeting if you so desire. But usually, people take this opportunity to be.
Okay, staff reports?
Okay. We are actually going to invite some representatives from the Granville Recreation District to come up and give a brief presentation. Did you hear that brief?
I was going to say, like how he slid that in.
That's right, that's right. So Andy Wildman, Brian Goss, and Craig Kester. Craig is our outgoing board member, and Brian is our incoming board member for the GRD as our appointment. So I want to make sure that we recognize Craig for all of his due diligence over the last several years. He really has done a lot to support the work of the GRD and the Granville schools, so I think we owe him a round of applause as well. Gentlemen, you can take the podium.
What about the coins?
Yeah. I just didn't want to get up, but grab one on there. No, there is a document in your packet that looks like that they are going to be referencing.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, board. So I am Craig Kester, and I have served as your appointed board person on the Granville Recreation District for the last 5 years, 6 years? 6 years.
6 years.
2 3-year terms, and prior to that, 5 years on the Granville Recreation Commission. So wanted to take the opportunity to really talk about where the Granville Recreation District has been, and I'll call it phase 1, over the past 5 years. And I think really with Brian's appointment, where the GRD is headed over the next 5 years. So I'll just go through this quickly. So the Granville Recreation District is made up of 5 board members, appointments from the school district, the village, and the township, and then 2 at-large board members as well. So as I talk about phase one, just sort of summarizing what's been accomplished since the GRD was formed. Frankly, the formation of the GRD was pretty important in 2011. So that was a formation through a resolution from the schools, the village, and the township that created the Granville Recreation District. With that, the GRD is its own taxing authority through 1 mil. So you'll see in 2010, that 1 mil and the budget in 2010 was $500,000, of which 1 mil generates $400,000 in revenue. 2015, the budget's $800,000. So where does that money come from? A whole lot of programming. So the GRD has always operated under the assumption that we will run a program if the cost will offset the cost of running the program. So, and really running programs is something that we've done very well. So we added staff. So in many, many ways, it was a startup company. We started with nothing. We hired Andy, which was more than nothing, Jeff. Hired. So we've added staff. We have a full-time director. We have a program director. We have a youth sports or team sports director. Recently added a full-time maintenance person and some part-time staff as well. So staff is needed to run the programs in significant programming. So in 2010, programs outside of special events, there were 2,000 participants. 2015, 3,500. So within that, 8 sports of the Granville Middle School are run through the GRD. So we think in fabulous partnership, sports that perhaps would have not otherwise been able to be funded or run. Those sports, those kids wear Granville on their wrestling jerseys. And they make that possible through partnership, and we really run that program, register those kids, make sure they have coaches, a place to practice and shoes to wear. So that has been something that I think that has been very important. As it relates to sports and programs, one of our big initiatives was to create an environment of team sports where kids wanted to stay in Granville. If I can stay close to home, play with my friends, practice and play at home wearing Granville on my shirt, kids will choose to do it. So as opposed to traveling to Hilliard or Dublin or Delaware, which my oldest son did because there wasn't enough opportunity here, kids are now staying here. So not only to have the opportunity to play with friends, but to play in a competitive way is something that's been established. So kids are really staying and playing in our community. Sportsmanship has been a big initiative. Sportsmanship has been a big challenge. But initiative really started by Andy to continue to say there are ideals that the school district has created, the GRD has adopted, and we frankly use the rules you have in place to ensure that sportsmanship is upheld. Special events, so Concert on the Green, there's a movie night coming up this year, the Great Granville Picnic. The Granville Recreation District has become the entity to run those programs. It only makes sense to have those programs run. So those are all the special events in Granville. We're the first place they really come to have those places run. And I would also add then marketing. So branding of the GRD, the logo, the website, online registration, really establishing the organization. That took a lot of work. And I'll sort of say that sort of is the top 5 things accomplished in phase 1 in terms of where the GRD was. As we talk about phase 2, what I'll do is challenge Brian and the board now. But it really, I think, is a good time, frankly, for me to hand it off, because all the stuff that was done in phase 1 is important, but it doesn't matter anymore, because what's important now is what it looks like going forward. And as an organization, the GRD is at the table with the schools, with the village, with the township. We're at the table, but not necessarily they don't pass the food to us all the time. So we've been invited from the little kids' table to the big table, and we're still there. Every holiday, we show up. And we serve ourselves. So working in silos is a phenomenon in this community that must be overcome. So no single entity can do this by themselves. The schools cannot go after facilities. The township cannot. The village will not. But together, I think this community can. So if we can break down those silos and start to work together more as Granville, that's only going to be good for this community going forward. You know, I would say the investment in a Granville education is incredibly important with children in this community. I know that. With a child in college, I know that very well. But it's more than academics. So as we look at the second piece, evaluating facilities, this community needs facilities. And I know there's a facility study going on, but we are out of space. We're using your space. The OHSAA rules put a pinch on the space that's available to the GRD. It's a problem that eventually we're going to have to say no. And it's a community not used to hearing the word no. So it's something that's going to have to come up. There's not enough court space. And sports have changed. So over the last 10 years, there weren't 29 varsity sports. And those 29 varsity sports put tremendous pressure on the GRD because there's an expectation when there's a varsity field hockey team, they better learn how to play field hockey in 4th grade because they can't start in 9th. So with supporting with the schools comes pressure on the GRD. So that's important to keep in mind as you think about the future going forward. Brindu is a topic we started to touch. It is a topic that must be addressed. Right now, Brindu is viewed as a rental facility. Brindu is charging us every time we use that facility. Fundamentally, we don't think it's right to have one tax entity charging another tax entity. And instead, there should be services, there should be partnership. And today, we've taken baby steps. And there's so much more that could be done. It's a facility this community doesn't understand. And it's a facility this community is not using. So I would ask the board, I'll ask the schools, we have to maximize how Brindu is being used because it's not being used the way the community wants it to be used. And lastly, I would view public recreation as an economic driver. Jeff, I know you started the economic discussions, but if you look at communities like New Albany, like Westerville, like Dublin, when they're drawing companies into those communities, public recreation is a big part of the reason people want to live there. So the continued investment in recreation is incredibly important if you look at communities throughout this country and how they leverage recreation in their community. So with that, that's Brian's challenge to get this forward. So again, I thank you. I thank you for the opportunity that you created in the GRD, the opportunity to serve your board representing your needs on the GRD and have full confidence that Brian will continue that going forward.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Craig.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, I'd just like to say thanks, Jennifer and Jeff, for putting your faith in me and to carry on the big shoes here Craig's left for me. I echo, the things that we have. We have a lot of challenges ahead of us. I know there's a huge pool of, everyone's going for resources, and that's what it's all about. But I think what you'll see, as you saw here with the athletes tonight and the different programs that we've recognized, that there's linkages there that need to continue to be improved. Athletic training, the facilities, the coaching, the parent behavior. And those are the things that are going to drive me to, continue to keep an open dialogue with you as a board of what your expectations are. And, I spent 24 years in the military before I moved to Granville a couple years ago. So I've got, I've got my own high standards of how behavior should be with athletics, with, academics, and with, behavior on and off the field. So I appreciate your support, your faith and confidence in me to carry that forward and to continue to improve, not just sports, but all the other programs that GRD can help foster, youths growing into those sports that Granville is going to lead us, into state championships and, other things like that. So thanks again and look forward to working for you.
Thank you.
One other thing that I wanted to say thank you for is that we didn't talk about in our first 5 years is finding a home from an office standpoint. This is a great fit for us, and I want to thank everyone who works in this building and the support we get from the school district, whether it's Jeff or Mike or Rob or Tina or it's Ryan or Travis or Tanya or Kevin Jarrett, who we work with all the time. The support from your administrators and from this board is tremendous, So I want to say thank you for that. You know, if you're ever here and you want to stop in and ask about a question about a program or something that we're doing, when you have as many registrants as we do, some of those aren't pleased in any given day. And so if you hear something in the community, please don't hesitate to call me or stop by and just ask. Our customer service level is extremely important to us. And any given day, we're not able to make everyone happy, but it's still important to us. I firmly believe that we represent 3,600 houses, and if something in your house is upside down on any given night, it's a big deal. No matter how small of a deal everyone else thinks it is, it's a really big deal, and that's important to us. So thank you for everything you do to support us here. We couldn't exist like we do today in our previous setting, and to have the tools and resources that we have here, it's making a huge difference in our organization. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Any comments?
I think we've got a great model, a kind of efficiency of working together, right? And I think that, you know, it's sort of come a long way already, you know, in terms of the connection and not seeing the entities as separate, right? But the efficiency that we have just with the office space, the way that we share sports, the way that you help manage sports and facilities is a great one. And I think the more resources of the community that we rope into that, right, that same mentality, there's just more efficiency to be gained for it. So thanks for your service to the board, Ryan. Thanks a lot for keeping in touch. You know, you're our ears to the ground in terms of how the GRD is doing, and you're always welcome back here. If there's things that we need that working session about, or just anytime come to a meeting or reach out to one of us so we can understand your perspective and appreciate your service.
Very much so.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. You can stay or you can go. I mean, come on.
Go to your office now.
Feel free.
11 years.
Yeah. I promise you're going to get a pin. All right. Next, I want to touch on a couple of the legislative updates. Between Mike and I, we're going to talk about some policy.
Those are on this board, I think.
That's my notes.
Thanks.
You want to take anything else, Frank?
Never did get a coin.
Keep it up. I want to talk about a couple of legislative things that are taking place. The first one is House Bill 7, which added the safe harbor provision for students in our current academic school year, which really limits any of the data from this year to be used for promotion, retention decisions, or part of a student being a part of a student's final grade. And this is really in reaction to a lot of the disequilibrium around the PARCC assessments and the new assessment system that was utilized. The only caveat to that is that the third grade guarantee provisions are still in place because OAA did not change. There was still a fall and will be a spring assessment window. So that has not changed. And also OGT, for those students that are taking OGT, there are still requirements that students will be subjected to. There are also provisions in House Bill 7 that allow students multiple retakes of end-of-course exams. That really is driven by federal requirements. If it's a high-stakes assessment, there has to be multiple opportunities for students to take those. And then there was also a provision in House Bill 7 that would prohibit ODE from withholding state funds for any students who opted out through ADM counts. So there was a lot of talk that if a student opted out, we would not get credit for them in our ADM, and they wanted to make sure that that didn't take place because of a lot of the, I would say, disequilibrium that has been occurring around the assessment system. In the 2015 report card, the data will be reflective but not have an overall letter grade. So remember, there are quite a few letter grades for the different sections of the local report card of the 6 components. So they're not going to be doing overall grades this year. And then also there is a reference to, but it was also in House Bill 487, that gave school districts latitude to kind of have a hold harmless provision for teachers within the collective bargaining agreement. And right now we do have in our collective bargaining agreement a hold harmless provision for teachers related to their student growth measures as part of their data for OTES. We are still including it, but in promotion, retention, and non-renewal decisions, we're not using that information to penalize teachers. So that latitude was given to us via House Bill 487. So that's kind of the a summary of what has happened. What is happening right now is, you know, that a couple of months ago, or a month ago, I testified in the House Education Committee and talked about House Bill 74. There was an omnibus amendment to House Bill 74 that was proposed by Andrew Brenner. And a lot of the things that we touched on in our testimony have made it into the amended House bill. Some of the provisions were recommended for future legislation. So let me talk a little bit about that. The first one is irrelevant, but one of the main provisions is that the state could not offer a contract for state assessments to a multi-state consortium, which is PARC and Smarter Balance. And they really tie that to any consortia receiving funds from the federal government. That, to me, is irrelevant. It's not necessarily what matters to our kids in Granville. But other things that are in the amendment are confining testing to one end-of-year summative assessment versus the current practice of breaking it into performance-based assessments and then end-of-year. Obviously, there's several staff members in the audience. They understand how much instructional time that took up. I don't want to use the word term wasted. But it was a massive amount of instructional time that was really dedicated to the state assessment system that really could have been utilized for instruction. And so that was something that we obviously testified about, and it's nice to see that the amendment has some provisions in there. Along those same lines, there was also, we did a lot of talking about the kindergarten readiness assessment and how extensive and time-consuming that was because it's individually administered, and we asked for latitude in picking alternative assessments, and there is a provision in there related to that as well. We also testified that ODE should spend some time doing concordance tables with current assessments that are being used, which would compare MAP assessments to STAR assessments to Terra Nova, so that no matter what assessment a state or a school district was utilizing, it could be compared to other assessments and be utilized for multiple purposes, like gifted education, like growth measures and diagnostic information. So that there's also a provision in there related to the utilization of what we're already doing related to MAP and some other diagnostics. I specifically testified as well about OTES and limiting the impact of student growth measures on a teacher's evaluation. You know, those of us that really were around growth measures from their infancy recognize that that information is best in the hands of a reflective practitioner. It's not about tying it to their evaluation to hold them accountable. It's about giving them another piece to the puzzle. Instruction is an art and a science. And so teachers are constantly going through that reflection process, and all data needs to be relevant, all data needs to be on the table, but I think you lose the value, no pun intended, of value-added information when you put it in a high-stakes context. And so we proposed that. Representative Patterson out of Cleveland definitely resonated with that point, and he tried to insert it into the omnibus amendment, but was told to create separate legislation. So we will be working with Representative Patterson to try and accomplish that. There is talk about moving the percentage from 50% to 35%. I think that's a step in the right direction. What I would like to see is a waiver, so school districts can work with their collective bargaining units to really use the data the way that we want to use that and exert local control. So I guess this is a long way of saying, I'm advocating on behalf of our school teachers and students and parents, and it's good to see that we're seeing some movement in the legislative process. And I'm sure it's going to go through several other rewrites. There is a committee formed in the Senate that is chaired by Peggy Lehner. We are also working with several other superintendents that are a part of that through the Alliance to really get some of the similar provisions, but also a more comprehensive look at the state assessment system and really figure out what are we accountable for and to whom. And I think that needs to be a question that the General Assembly and ODE answers. So.
That's what I had a question about, because in the paper the other day, because you talked about the state not having financial consequences for students opting out of the tests. And there was an article in the paper the other day, though, that talked about the federal consequences for not being able to do tests. Because if we get rid of Park, I was like, well, why don't we just get rid of testing altogether for next year? Because nothing new or beneficial will come up in that short period of time. But there was $750 million federal dollars that we would lose if we didn't do. So can you talk a little bit about what's federal, what's state?
So there is a federal requirement so this goes back to No Child Left Behind. And then No Child Left Behind was reauthorized as the educational ESEA Act.
Elementary and Secondary Education Act.
Yes, thank you. I was blanking for a moment. And that was reauthorized, which really created a waiver for a lot of the provisions in No Child Left Behind, but still had the requirement to test in English and mathematics 3 through 8, and then science and social studies in different time frames. So once in elementary, once in middle, once in high. And so those are the minimum federal requirements in order to receive funding. We did propose that some of the MAP assessments that we utilize could be used for that purpose. And we were told by the feds that although that was done in Utah and Wyoming, it was a 1-year waiver, and they're not going to be granting that waiver again. The other complicating issue is that the reauthorization of ESEA is currently underway, and if that fails, which I hear it is, potentially going to fail, it reverts back to the original No Child Left Behind. So there's a lot of politicking going on right now. But that being said, I think what we need to do is continue to advocate for our General Assembly to do what they think is best for Ohio students. Really $750 million in $1 billion or so dollars.
It's still a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, but I think it comes with a lot of requirements. I looked at the wrong, 700. I looked in the wrong direction. Of course it's a lot of money to you. But I think we have to look at what are the requirements and how can we live within their sandbox, but also do what's best for Ohio kids. Does that answer your question?
It does. Just because there seems, we're doing things for the feds, we're doing things for the state, and then we're doing things that actually benefit kids.
Correct. Yes. I would say if you ask our teachers, the MAP data is what's most relevant to them because it's timely and it's done at multiple points, so it gives them checkpoints, and then it allows them through the reporting system to really use that information to drive instructional practices. And so the upper grades are getting more comfortable utilizing that, but at the elementary we've been using that for several years, and it's been very beneficial. You're welcome.
Thanks for advocating, and really it's really cool to hear the changes that are kind of, I hear here first, right? And then we see it reflected in legislation and motion and so forth, so that's really neat to see. And I would say, it's a hard process, but keep it up, right? It's really important. The whole OTES thing and your advocacy for bringing logic to that process and bringing some local control, right, is important because we're in a different situation here than many other districts are, but we need the latitude to be able to adjust the system to be logical.
Correct.
Right, and I and parents and community members are very supportive of testing that's useful to direct instruction, right? But the rest of the testing that seems to come our way is a challenge, and so, it's good that we're staying on top of that. And I'd encourage you, actually, ask you to I know as a part of the innovation process, which you'll talk about in a little bit, there was a testing group, right? And they might really benefit to send that subcommittee just this quick little update that you did. I know you've done a lot, recently, and I bet those folks would be encouraged to hear that and maybe even excited to get back together and form a, subcommittee to hear what's happening and spread the word better.
Excellent.
So, thanks.
Thank you.
Jeff, do you think that the emphasis of late on the assessment side is just another way to get rid of the Common Core through the back door?
Actually, I believe that, and there's Chuck. I believe that the elimination of Park is more of a compromise so that the Common Core would stay in place. Because really, the Common Core is a set of standards. And I have not heard a legitimate argument about what is wrong with those standards from anybody. And honestly, we have the ability to exceed them. So I hear, well, it doesn't have cursive writing. We still teach cursive writing. So we have the ability to exceed the standards. Those are standards that the state proposes, and we have some local control. And this board did approve the Common Core standards for, and now we call them the New Ohio Learning Standards, because we believe that it's a rigorous curriculum for our students. So I don't think that is going to continue to resurface. I think this is maybe a political compromise. Okay. Now Mike is going to wow you with a conversation around the budget.
The state budget, let me give you a little of the process first, and I'll go into what's actually in there. The House, Tuesday night, last Tuesday, late afternoon, the House accepted its substitute version of the governor's budget. This afternoon, about 2.5 hours ago, the omnibus amendment to the budget came out. And I went through it. There's nothing in there that is substantial from our standpoint from what was in the version from last week. I think the process will be the Finance Committee will probably vote it out tomorrow. I mean, it'll probably go to the House floor most likely on Thursday for the House to send it on to the Senate. So that's kind of the process. What's in there, Jeff was and I know, Jen, you also alluded to the park testing. From what I understand, and I haven't had a chance to look at any of the language, the House eliminated the use of any state funds to administer park testing going forward. There was nothing in the omnibus amendment that I saw today that struck that language. Now, that was one of the things I was looking for going through there. I didn't see anything to strike that, so I assume that will still be part of the budget when it leaves the House later this week. As far as the school funding formula, the House made some pretty substantial changes, both from what the governor introduced and from what is in current law.
Nice look.
Huh?
It's a nice look.
Thank you.
He's been trying to figure it out for several days now.
Yeah. If you remember 2 years ago when I told you, as we look at the new funding formula, if you knew the old funding formula, you need to forget everything you knew about the old formula, including the charge-off. Now you have to ignore what I said about forgetting that and remember again, because the House has brought back a charge-off as the determination of local share of funding. The charge-off is based off of 20 mils of average taxable value, but it's a variable charge-off based on the relative median income within the school district, which, as you can imagine, is not helpful to us. The new charge-off will range in fiscal 16 in the House version from a low of 10.5 mils, which would be in the poorest district on income. It's capped at 23.15 mils, and we fall into that cap area. Our income relative to the statewide median is above the threshold to hit the maximum. About 4 o'clock, I finally finished programming all of this into the software. that we use. I have not had, it looks like it looks like it's consistent, and I think it makes sense. I haven't had a chance to actually go back and make sure of everything yet. Our current state share index is 34.4%, meaning we get about, a little over a third of the state funding. By my calculations and a couple assumptions I had to make about what's not in the law, but which you kind of have to imply in the law based on what they're doing for the next 2 years. By fiscal year 19, I'm estimating our state share will drop to 20.5% from 34.4. So that's about a 40% drop in our base calculation. Now, what the House has done that's different from current law and the Senate, and the governor, is they instituted a guarantee at this year's level. So that actually helps us in the short run over both the governor's proposal and current law. Because I've been assuming under both of those that we would lose money because of our wealth and enrollment. This would actually freeze us for the next 2 years at our current level of funding, which is a positive thing. But when you get beyond 2017, it's really hard to figure out what to assume as far as state aid, because they made the guarantee this year, we go on to the guarantee starting next year, as opposed to right now we're on the cap and we're expecting to go on the formula. By my calculations, we would go on to the guarantee by about $720,000 next year, and by 2019, we would be nearly $2 million on the guarantee, meaning if there was no guarantee, we'd get $2 million less from the state than we are getting right now. So beyond next year, essentially the whole forecast becomes what do you think is going to happen to the guarantee, assuming the House version goes into effect. And so that's kind of where we are right now. I'll make some type of decision before I do the 5-year forecast presentation next month. I'll just.
So good luck with the 5-year.
Well, no, I think it's important
Yeah.
for the board to think about that, because we are going to have to craft an assumption, and we will meet in our 2x2 meetings to try and figure out, okay, what approach do we want to take? Do we want to reflect the governor's proposal, the House proposal? And it really does impact our long-range planning, and it really is going to be very difficult.
Yeah, and here's part of the well, I've heard several different things about what might happen in the Senate, and they've been all over the place. I saw somewhere today that they're talking the Senate may throw out what the House did and the governor did and the current formula and start from scratch, which is kind of actually a very scary thought given
How long it took?
given the fact that it's now late April and the budget has to be in place in 2 months is actually kind of scary thought. But part of the problem is if the Senate doesn't go down that route, you can't really compromise between the governor's approach and the House approach. The House approach is using a charge-off. The governor's approach is using relative wealth. There's no kind of hybrid there. You really have to do one or the other. You can't kind of split the difference and figure out what to do, because mechanically it doesn't work. And so, again, that just complicates things. Is they've got to go they really have to go one direction or the other, or some third direction that we're not thinking of right now. And so that really just adds to the uncertainty. Even compared to where we were 2 years ago when the new budget came in, 2 years ago, the Senate basically accepted what the House did. And that looks less likely to be the case this time than it was 2 years ago. And again, our problem is we have to do the 5-year forecast between now and when the Senate takes any action. So we'll just have to cross that bridge as we're coming to it. We'll do the best we can with our assumptions. We can always, if we err horribly in our assumptions and it makes a material difference to the forecast, you can readopt the 5-year forecast, and we can submit a new forecast over the summer, if it's drastic enough that we think it makes material difference. If we don't, we can calibrate in October, knowing what at least what the current, or at that time, current biennium will have in place. So that's kind of where we are with the budget. There's been some enhancements that have been done, none of which benefited us. So
Kind of makes those economic discussions all that much more important.
All that more, much important. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and like, almost regardless of the budget that we have to submit that has to have numbers in there, we need to kind of figure out how to communicate this around the community. And as if school funding wasn't and isn't complicated enough to have this huge uncertainty that even if we explain it extremely well, all the intricacies of it, we still are kind of bracketing this huge thing, right? I think is going to be challenging to swallow and important for people to understand, to drive the economic conversation and to let them know about levies and all those kinds of things, right? Because, guarantee versus not guarantee a couple years out, it's the kind of thing that it doesn't have a lot of political support in some ways, and people want to get rid of it. And that's a huge impact on our budget.
Potentially we have $2 million
right
on the table, and when
That's
you think
massive.
about it, that's 8 or 9% of our operating budget. That's a big deal.
Right. Ugh.
And unfortunately, as complicated as the old formulas were, and as complicated as the current formula is, the new formula, I think, is actually even a little more complicated.
You mean the new charge-off?
Hmm?
You mean the one that's the new chart, or the
The
charge-off?
House version of it is a little more, I think, is a little even more complicated than the governor's version was and the current version, because they make some pretty substantial changes. They added another component into funding to try and help low-capacity school districts. We had a real struggle with that because they drafted it wrong. And the way they drafted it made absolutely no sense. And it took us a while to finally figure out that it made no sense, and we talked to the House, and the omnibus bill actually fixes the language so that it gets to what it was they were intending to do.
But sort of in reality, a guarantee is sort of our best case short-term scenario, right? Like, am kind of surprised, right? Because my assumption is always things will get worse for towns like Granville that have demonstrated income capability to pay or whatever, right? It'll kind of maintain the same at best or get worse. So the guarantee just sort of keeps us hanging on for a while, but it looks like a big cliff out there, if that goes away.
Yeah, yes, 100% guarantee of current funding is probably the best we could hope for.
Yeah.
Because of both our increasing wealth and our declining enrollment.
Right.
Under most other circumstances, it's making us either wealthier under the relative wealth, or it's causing us to lose funding because our ADM times this funding level is going down. A guarantee is probably the
best scenario
the best
short
that
term.
we can hope for, is end at the same funding level that we have this year.
Right, so it sort of feels good short term almost, right? But just looking at a couple of years, the swing that has, and I think we almost have to bracket the forecast, and you have to submit one, but we have to communicate and think internally, okay, it could be this or it could be this.
Well, it might be neither, though.
Oh, yeah,
It could be not, yes, it could be something the Senate could go completely in another direction.
Right.
Could we get back to the point where we were, seems like so long ago, when many of us joined the board, where we had nothing that kept getting kicked down the road? Mm-hmm. And now we have so many options to choose from.
And my concern with the current formula the House has adopted is I don't think it's going to work in the long run. I think that they were trying to solve problems that they had this year, and I think that the way they solved those problems are not going to work right 2 years from now, and they're going to have to start tweaking it again, assuming the House version goes through. And again, the other main concern I have is how far onto the guarantee it's throwing us. Yeah, because that just, nobody likes guarantees.
Right.
Some people like, some people like.
I'm just going on the record, I do.
Some people like them less than other people like them.
I'll take an indefinite one, it'll be
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, but for the most part, nobody really likes guarantees.
Yeah.
And that, yeah, when there's a guarantee sitting there, it's a potential easy target.
Right. Because why do you change the formula if you're going to have a guarantee anyway, right? You only change the formula
Right,
because
and
you're going to move the
that's
needle
exactly
economically, right?
You know,
So,
if you think about it from a standpoint that's not real favorable to us, if you think about it, what's the point of saying you have a formula to make the wealthier districts pay more and raise more locally if you're then going to put a guarantee in so it never
Right.
takes effect?
exactly.
You know, even though we don't want it to take effect, what's the point? You know,
Right.
where's the logic in that?
Yeah. Right.
Is everything in place that, you know, whatever version that we're looking at, still overly reliant on property taxes, such as that lawsuit has said that, you know, our funding formula is unconstitutional?
They're all,
They're all.
Yes.
They're all.
This goes
Yeah.
back a ways.
I think it's actually a pretty moot point whether it's unconstitutional or not. Because, you know, basically the Supreme Court washed its hands of it 10 years ago. And no one's going to bring a new lawsuit. You know, the resources it takes and, you know, what is over-reliant? Who knows? You know, you can argue it is constitutional, you can argue it's not constitutional. It's kind of a moot argument at this point, really, because it's not factoring into anything.
Right, there's no consequence, it's been applied.
There's no consequences for it being unconstitutional. And no one's going to step, you know, after however many years it's been since the Supreme Court washed its hands of it, no one's going to all of a sudden start, you know, bringing it back onto the front burner again.
How much longer is Kasich, time is relative to me, how much longer is he in?
He was just reelected
Right,
last
so
November.
so,
So he's in through the early 2019. Assuming he doesn't become president.
right, that's kind of, because at a certain point, I mean, whatever comes to him, if it's not his version, he can always say, sorry, not going to sign, right?
He could,
Do you think he would do that?
no. Not in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah.
He may there may be things he line item vetoes. I don't see him vetoing the entire budget over the school funding formula.
because there wouldn't be time to implement something else.
It would be pretty chaotic. I mean, you'd have to be operating under the current formula with some type of a bridge where basically they're just funding along with the current formula till something new goes in place, and then everything just goes haywire as they try and, you know, if they've been funding us based on X, and all of a sudden the new formula determines we're supposed to get Y, which is X minus $1 million, and they've already paid us more, you know, there's just all kinds of issues. There's issues. I don't think it will come to that.
Innovation process?
Okay, Rob, go on a cue, I'll get the lights. While Rob's pulling that up,
I just want to frame the conversation from the standpoint of what was the innovation process. At the beginning of this school year, we embarked on a process that was involving the staff, students, and community related to where do we want to place our emphasis moving forward, and really prioritize our resources over the next 3 to 5 years from an innovation perspective. We had about 70-some people at our initial meeting, and we had close to 50 people that kind of stayed connected and rotated through for the rest of the meetings at different points. And we met 6 times and went from, quite a few ideas down to a few key concepts that I'm going to talk about today. But what I wanted to start with was talking a little bit about how we frame the conversation. So all of the staff members are going to chuckle and smile because they've seen these lenses probably 1,000 times. I don't apologize for it. But we really started talking about what are the learning foundations and in Granville and why are they important to getting at the heart of student learning. So we really talk about the intersection of curriculum assessment and instruction getting at the heart of student learning in a 21st century context. We have spent a lot of time over the last 5 years, 4 years that I've been here, really being clear on what is the curriculum, what we want students to know and be able to do, and how are we going to assess if they can do it. And we really placed a heavy emphasis on formative assessment, which is a high-yield instructional strategy that is proven by research to support getting maximum student learning. And so we spent a lot of time in these 2 lenses and talked about their intersection, because you can't assess accurately if you don't know what it is you're supposed to be teaching. So we spent a lot of time on that. And really, before we got into the instructional lens, I wanted to have this community process because there are a lot of instructional approaches out there and a lot of best practices, and we wanted to kind of talk a little bit about that to see where we were from a pedagogical perspective moving into this next 3 to 5 year plan. So that's kind of framed our conversation. One of the things that we've been promoting as a Board of Education through the board benchmarks is that notion of a culture of continuous improvement. As an organization, we are consistently challenged to prepare our students for an ever-changing global landscape. We know that our educational system has to prepare kids differently than the educational system prepared us. It is a completely different environment. When I was in school, I had to go to an encyclopedia that was on the shelf and pull it out, dust it off, and read what was written, and it was probably 10 to 15 years old at that time. Now, everybody Googles it. That has its own challenges because what is out there may be accurate or not. But it is definitely a different environment, so we have to be preparing and thinking about evolving our instructional practices to continue to meet the needs of our students. And those instructional practices, there is more research now about the benefit of educational strategies and what works best for kids now more than ever before. So making sure that we pick high leverage instructional strategies that really get the best bang for the buck. In education, the pendulum swings back and forth. Giving you an example, it was whole language, then it was phonics, and the reality is it's right in the middle. Kids need both. So we need to continually to evolve our instructional practices to meet the needs of our students. So the goal that we had through the innovation process was what evolutionary or revolutionary innovations are necessary that should focus our strategic efforts towards continuous improvement. And we talked about evolutionary being that kind of evolving pattern of instructional practices versus revolutionary, which are disruptive or brand new. And so we kind of framed that for the entire group that worked on this process. What was great about this process was, and I think I reference it in a little bit, you know what, I'm going to skip and go to this point. The other thing that I framed the conversation with the community about was it has to be, our mindset has to be all students. It can't be a pocket of students, students that are only interested in robotics or only interested in the environment or only interested in Jim and several others might flog me for saying that, but it has to be all of our students. That really, what benefits all of our kids. And so that was our mindset going through this process, and I think that's really critically important in this conversation. Our initial brainstorming had over 100 suggested ways to innovate in Granville schools. We were down to 4 at that time. And I'll talk a little bit about how we kind of push some groups into different areas to keep them going, but really, they're not necessarily potentially involved in our strategic process long-term. Initially going into this process, I really wanted, knowing that we have limited resources, get our priority down to one thing. And through the process, it became more important and more critical to me that the power of "and" really, it wasn't just one thing, it was multiple things. It became more apparent to me. I was so pleased because the commitment of the community members. Multiple people stayed highly engaged. We actually had them doing a lot of action research, and they came prepared to every single meeting, which I think that's the benefit of being in Granville, where parents care, they're committed, and they're willing to do the work.
I'm going to echo that as
so
well.
is our staff. What?
I'm going to echo that as well. I mean, not only did they commit a couple hours for these monthly meetings or whatever, but the work that was done outside of the meetings with people doing really high-level research and looking into all different kinds of instructional strategies and innovative thoughts and things, it's just huge to be able to have the community do that. That was great.
Yeah. And then finally, I think my general thought was, for me, I was given the gift of listening. I didn't have to facilitate these meetings. I sat back and I listened to what our staff, our parents, and some of our students were saying about the education that we provide to students. So, it was really nice to be able to sit back and just listen instead of facilitate. So it gave me a different vantage point than I rarely get as superintendent. So those were some general thoughts. My recommendation to the board will be we got down to 4 main ideas, and they were generally project-based learning, a K-12 articulation of technology skill sets and/or computer programming involved in that. We had STEM or STEAM or interdisciplinary studies, and then we had global languages at the K-6 level. So we had all of those kind of ideas floating around, but really what I felt like had the most benefit to all students was this notion of focusing on project-based learning. And I'm going to say project-based learning with a caveat, because I want everybody to understand that we have not framed what we mean by project-based learning. That's still going to be an evolving process over the next year to figure out what we mean by project-based learning, because it really has elements of STEM, STEAM, interdisciplinary studies, problem-based learning versus project-based learning. There are a lot of different definitions. We need to get a shared understanding of what we're talking about. And by we, I mean the entire staff. Even in my administrative team, when we talk about, okay, so what do we think of project-based learning? It's like, well, what's your version of project-based learning that you're thinking of? And my version might be different. So there's a learning process that really has to take place as a staff. And I'm going to be, after I share, tonight, I'm going to be visiting each building and talking a little bit about this process, because we have 1 year to prepare for what is going to be the professional development that we're going to offer in the future. And that really is really quite open-ended right now, which is kind of nice but also scary. Have you ever gotten a syllabus where it's open-ended and you go, well, what do you expect? That kind of openness is the right opportunity for our staff to get creative and to really define what it is we mean when we say project-based learning. And it can take many more, or take a lot of different, or look many different ways. But our goal is for students to apply learning to life. We want our students to take the content that they learn and be able to replicate that content or skill in what they have to do, not just in school, but outside. And so that is our goal. This is a 3 to 5 year plan. And I want to be clear, because I think it's important to understand we have had this philosophy of going painfully slow at times to move fast in the long run. We spent a lot of time creating clear learning targets, right? okay? But that set the stage for everything else that we are going to do. And I think that's important because you have to move very slowly and intentionally. And I think the benefit of now versus when I first got to Granville is we can be a little bit more invitational about how we approach this. And that came out in some of the factors in the decision making. So one, it fits our criteria. It benefits all students. It is aligned with best practices. It aligns with research that this type of an instructional approach, and it doesn't mean you have to do this only. You know, bottom line is, our kids are going to have to take the ACT, SAT. They have to have a certain knowledge base, but how they are learning that knowledge and that content is really up to our teachers to do. You know, one of the things I hear from teachers regularly is, you know, Jeff, I remember the good old days when, you know, we were able to be creative in the instructional approaches that we utilize, and now it's been a little bit more regimented because of the state assessment system and the accountability system. You know, I want to give our teachers the latitude to be a little bit more creative, and that's going to take board support as well, you know, through the board benchmarks. And I think we're going to have to do some rethinking of what we're measuring and how we're measuring that, because moving forward, that will be a barometer of our success of this initiative. So I think we need to think about that as a board and a governance team. So hopefully this matches the teacher's desire for wanting more creativity. And then, you know, it also hits a lot of the instructional ideas generated in the brainstorming session. For example, 21st century skills, critical thinking, collaboration, and teamwork. All of those things can fit into the concept of project-based learning. And the power of and. So one of the things that we heard from the group was that there was a need to potentially build a computer science course at GHS. And I think what we tried to do is, if this is going to be how we're going to approach professional development, what are other areas that we can, given the right context and opportunities, really work towards? But it might not be the main focus of our school district. And so we will commit to taking opportunities to, you know, build additional opportunities for our students that align with what maybe they need walking out of our K-12 institution. But beyond just a specific course, we need a K-12 articulation of technology literacy. And programming and coding is part of that, but I think there's a lot of littler steps in between that start from kindergarten and really build upon one another to give our kids the skills that they need to learn. And then also, those skills are going to be very important in that project-based learning environment, because their students are going to have to be able to communicate effectively, because that's what part of project-based learning is, being able to communicate, and a lot of times they communicate using a variety of technology. And the technology change on a regular basis. You know, I utilize PowerPoint. You know, Travis back there, who's a lot younger than I, he likes Prezi. Okay, Prezi wasn't available when I was, some computers weren't available when I was in college. So times change, technology changes. We also want to recognize that given the right economic context, we may be able to add global languages at the K-6 level. But now we know what people would want. Before it was guesswork. So if the community says, hey, we really value global languages K-6, that would be actually the easiest thing to implement, but might have a little bit of a challenge with it because it would potentially impact his budget in a negative way. And so, you know, it's about adding 2 additional staff members, and how sustainable is that? And with the state budget still unclear, I wasn't comfortable, and I know Mike wasn't comfortable proposing that as the innovation to pursue at this time. But given the right conditions, I would be comfortable if we could achieve that. I think it would add value to all of our students, because language acquisition starts young. And so why we start teaching foreign language or global languages at the middle school versus at the lower levels doesn't make any sense anyway. So again, I think I'm comfortable with making that recommendation. Through the innovation process, I think it's important to understand that that process is ended, but a new one is beginning. So and I kind of referenced it already, it's really defining what we mean by project-based learning. The innovation process achieved its goal. It defined our collective priorities for the future of the schools, but now we must create our implementation process and develop our collective understanding of that issue. We'll utilize a process called the design thinking process, and that's going to be a heavy staff engagement process. We're really going to engage the staff and administration with the support of the World Class Education Committee to start that process. We most likely will begin that process in June. And what's really nice is, like I said, it's going to be an authentic process because we really don't know what the outcome is. I know for a fact we're not going to buy a project-based learning kit and give it to every teacher. That is counterintuitive and not what we really want. We want the creativity and the expertise that our staff has to really come out through this process. So it's nice to be able to engage the staff in that way. The change process. We know change is difficult at times. And quite honestly, the staff has experienced many changes over the last 5 years. I think there have been more changes in the last 5 years in education than in the previous 15. So they are a little weary, but they're enduring this conversation for a while, so that's pretty impressive. But I think one of the things that some of the staff members said is, Jeff, we really want this to be more invitational. And there are some specific subjects that really lend themselves well to project-based learning, specifically the sciences and the math and the integration of those. It needs to be invitational and give teachers the opportunity to explore and take risks. This is not me saying, okay guys, we are now a project-based learning district. By next year, change all of your instructional practices to this approach. That's not going to be my directive. You can sigh a big sigh of relief. It is really going to be that invitational process. It's not top down, it should be bottom up. And I want people who have a passion for that type of learning, whatever we define that to be, to really give them the opportunity and the power, and then share what they've done with their kids. So I think that's important. We must go slow to go fast. It's a 3 to 5 year plan. Again, the challenge as the instructional leaders to go slowly, go slow, be intentional, and we actually move further along in the long run. But sometimes it's, you don't want to do too much too fast. The other thing that we need to be aware of is this innovation looks vastly different at a K-6 versus a 712. 712 is more content specific. It could be more interdisciplinary in its approach because you have end of course exams in the high school. So you have to have kids prepared, but we do some of this already. Jim Redding is a perfect example. Scott Carpenter and Al Spence in their IAP class. We have some great examples of I think what we're trying to do a little bit more systemically, but again, we have to really create our own shared understanding of what it is we want our students to experience, and then work on building capacity of staff to do that. But it can look different. As an elementary teacher, it's not the old thematic units that we used to build, where we had to build all the content into one big thematic unit. It's different than that. But it's a little bit more easy to accomplish because I have 25 kids all day long. Okay, where the middle school, high school, they rotate. So it has to be a little bit more intentional. And then I think the goal is to start small, be invitational, have teachers take risks, work collaboratively. And so it's going to take a little bit of intentional collaboration too, if teachers can work together to create projects that are meaningful for students. I think it's important to recognize that there are a couple of key indicators from a research perspective of what makes a kid very successful in college. One of those indicators is if a kid can at least participate and do decent in an AP course. They tend to be in the higher likelihood pool of students that graduate college. The other thing is a significant project. If a student is involved in a significant project in their high school career, they have a higher likelihood of success in completing college. So Gallup put together that research. So I think a lot of these things are what we would say are beneficial to our students. And, you know, sometimes it's the students that maybe aren't as academically successful that really thrive in a project type environment because they have a different skill set. So it also gives kids a little bit more of a variety of ways to show and demonstrate their knowledge. So next steps, it's April, it's in the board meeting, I'm making my recommendation to you. I'm going to attend staff meetings at each building. You guys, I'm sorry, from the middle school, you're going to hear this again. Because although there were a lot of staff members that participated, there were a lot of staff members that didn't participate and hear all the conversation that took place over those 6 meetings. And then I think we need to regularly communicate with the Innovation Think Tank group so that we can constantly calibrate. And then really the conduit to the community is going to be the World Class Education Committee. And a lot of the people that participated in that process also sit on that superintendent's committee that Ryan facilitates. So those are the next steps. And I want to just take the opportunity to publicly thank the people that participated in the process, thank the board members for supporting this process, and the staff that engaged in the process. I think it was more than what I anticipated. And it really helped frame for me, you know, as your instructional leader, what are the possibilities moving forward? And I think we do a pretty darn good job now. But I think we can continue to evolve what we provide for our students. And really, it's exciting to me. I like new learning. I like the thrill of taking a risk and seeing what kids can do. And kids always impress me. They always impress me. They usually do better jobs than the adults. Sorry, adults. But they do. It's unbelievable. So I'm really excited about this. And I think the Innovation Think Tank members really have some credit that they deserve because I think they're really going to impact the students in the future. So, any questions about the innovation process?
Just real quickly, there were 8 key ideas that we funneled other directions.
Yes,
You're going to
thank
touch
you.
on that?
Yes. Okay, so there were a couple of other groups that were up in the top 10, but we really put into a different committee structure. So one of them was looking at a balanced calendar. A lot of conversation started around a year-long or a year-round calendar, but really when they got down to their recommendation, it was more of a balanced calendar with maybe shorter breaks during the summer, but a few other pockets spread throughout the year. We have in our collective bargaining agreement a committee that really looks at the calendar every single year. So we're going to move that group into that calendar committee structure. We also had a group that looked at movement in the classroom. And so that group is going to be working with Tanya to put together grant requests to create some more or purchase some furniture that would be more advantageous in the classroom for movement. And looking at different strategies there, so that group is working. We also, help me.
A couple of you talked about the
Computer
programming.
Testing.
Oh, testing, right.
Testing and.
About the time change, wasn't there something about?
That was part of the calendar
Okay.
conversation, the flip time, yeah.
Mhm.
And the testing group, really what I said was, you know, I'm working on it. I want to keep you updated. I think you know, we kind of heard a little bit about what was happening in the General Assembly right now related to testing. And it's really my opportunity to continue to advocate for what they believe is best for our kids. And I think some of the things that they talked about, specifically in third grade and kindergarten, at different, with PBAs versus EOIs, are starting to be reflected in the current legislation that's being proposed.
Did the movement piece, just out of curiosity, did it include chairs?
Mhm.
Certain kind of chairs?
Yes, it did.
Be careful what you wish for.
Well, there were multiple versions of that, from bouncy balls to tilt seats to standing desks to.
We just outfitted our entire middle school with movable chairs, except for, well, and some of that, they were purchased sort of carte blanche without thinking about the age of the kids, some of the learning needs of the students in that class.
That's why
Whether
we're
the class was a science room with a linoleum floor. So carefully think about that.
We're piloting.
Yes.
Remember, move slow to go fast?
Yeah,
I
so
think that's
definitely
something that we're going to do. And really, they're going to be writing grants to the GEF in the future to fund that, so.
And I mean, in some, they're great in certain rooms,
Right.
and teachers love them and the kids love them and they do exactly what they're supposed to do.
Sure.
But in other spaces, more thinking should have gone into that.
Caution noted.
Because you can't return.
That's right.
It was a great process to be involved with, and it's kind of as a spectator, like you said, you know, it was really hard to not jump in and get engaged and like back some projects and try and work on things. But, you know, I think you did a fantastic job and also encouraged us to like stay back and watch and see what happens. And I guess I couldn't have imagined a better outcome. Like whatever I had gone in with, I thought, oh, this is what we should do, right? That's not what it is, and it's better. And I think that it's good to consider it very much a draft right now, right? But very much a strong direction that we heard as a consensus of the group, you know. And when each one of these groups got up and presented, it's like, there are a lot of heads nodding, like, yeah, I can see how great curriculum fits exactly into there. And I think we really do have to personalize it for Granville and be willing to commit the resources necessary. You know, I think we were appropriately, you know, budget conscious through this process and not just throwing a lot of staff at it and so forth. But I know that to do this right, you know, we'll have to include, I don't know what planning periods, I don't know what professional development, but I think we need to be seriously considering that this is an investment that's going to really take us to a next level, and including changing benchmarks, you know. And if this is really going to be a direction, I don't think that you can measure the outcome of the success of this with our existing benchmarks. And the World Class Education Committee has talked about that a couple of times, and it's a kind of nebulous thing to get your hands around. So I think that it's going to take a full year, right, to come to consensus ourselves about what this means, come up with the phrases, come up with the communications that's clear. And, you know, and it's not going to be, you know, one size fits all for all the classrooms and so forth. But we've had great examples in all the buildings of fantastic instruction using project-based learning kinds of models. And I think that the more we can proliferate that, it's going to really be to the benefit, like you said, of all the students. So I was just really excited to see this come to a conclusion, and I'm thrilled to start the next phase of the process and very committed to it as a wholehearted supporter.
Yeah, I think we're excited, but we're also a little nervous because, you know, we're supposed to have all the answers, and we don't necessarily have the answers. But the power of that is we collectively can create the answers.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of an exciting time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great.
Any other comments?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Right. So, I guess you could discuss it in board.
We could discuss a little
Yeah.
bit more if we wanted. Did you have any other comments or thoughts or questions about the process? Tom and I sat in on most of it, so we're fairly well briefed on what went on. But I don't know if you have any other questions or thoughts.
I'd like to express my support for trying to find a way to move languages into the realm of possibility within the scope of our resources.
Did you hear that, Mike?
Mike?
Yeah,
Just do it right if you're going to do it.
right,
Right.
yeah. And I think that's an important point.
It's got to be sustainable.
I don't want to start and stop.
No.
I want it to be sustainable.
Right.
But I think it was clear that the group that was participating definitely prioritized that as something that would be advantageous for our students.
And there were parents in that group that were parents of high schoolers. So it's not even like their
Right.
kids
Would benefit.
would benefit, but they understand, the importance of doing languages at younger grades. So I thought that was.
The earlier you can start.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that,
Yeah. It's kind of a tough process to like down select just sort of one. And I don't think we're quite there yet because this whole process is going to be really defining what the focus is. But, I came in really excited about STEM, right? I think there's a huge opportunity in STEM and technology and doing something very different, right? And I kind of sort of expected that to be an outcome, that we'd have a STEM track or something along those lines and so forth, right? But I think within, project-based learning, there's a lot of other things that fit in there. And the economics are sort of attractive, right? Because even if you do end up spending development and planning periods and staff as coordinators, right? I think that's leveraged so highly across all the students in terms of the cultural change that you can affect. I think it's going to be exciting to see what happens.
I would like to commend you for finding alternative paths to fostering some of the ideas that didn't fit perhaps into the main initiative, but can be approached in more creative ways.
That really,
That's impressive.
That was, and honestly, it goes back to the gift of listening and saying, all right, I don't have a preconceived notion of what this is going to be. So what are the possibilities, which was kind of nice. So a little added benefit.
that was impressive. And I like the idea of project-based learning in part because it can be STEM, it can be interdisciplinary, and, we have students who are strong math science, but we certainly have students who are strong humanities, social sciences, English, and I think
Arts.
And so I think this is an approach that can actually encompass, a wide range of students' interests and abilities and what they get excited about and stuff like that. So again, we have a long way to go to define it, but I think it has the possibility to encompass a lot, rather than be, not to like diss them or anything.
No, I totally agree with you.
But I
totally
think,
agree.
that,
It can cast a wide net.
Yeah, it can cast a wide net, for sure, so.
And one of my favorite times of the year is coming up when I get to be involved in the senior project and sit down and watch the kids in their society project. And I know it's evolving, but the kids do some great work and they're very creative, they're articulate, they've done their due diligence, and so it's a good time. And you can tell that they've learned a lot through what they create. And it's very collaborative, and you see the strengths, where, kids create a national anthem for their society, and the music person is, taking the lead and helping everybody participate. And then, the math science people are, they're working on their structural components, and it's a good example of maybe the potential opportunities.
I was just thinking that we discussed sometimes that there was a lot of overlap in the groups, which is, again, sort of leads us to, sort of project-based learning. But I'm wondering if we want to intentionally invite somebody from each of the groups to be on the World Class Education Committee, because then those perspectives
Overlap.
will be represented as we move forward and shape what it is that we. I mean, I think some of them are already on the committee, but we just wanted to see if, I know it's availability, but maybe intentionally.
Did you hear that, Ryan? He's got it. Okay. Excellent.
Anything else? No?
Anything else?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, we've reached the point in the meeting where we will entertain public comments. If you'd like to address the board, please approach the podium. State your name and address, and you can speak for 3 to 5 minutes. If there's anybody that would like to address the board, please come forward. Okay, moving on to board reports. Just, given that it's already 8:10, I'll give a brief update on things that are happening at CTEC. This is the time of the year where lots of things are happening for students, so it's kind of exciting. We just had our induction into the National Technical Honor Society. There was 40 students inducted, which I think is one of the larger groups in the recent past. And induction is based on grades, attendance, passing state exams, citizenship, and teacher recommendations. And so there was 40 students, and they were across all of the programs, the different programs. So, dental assisting, medical assisting, architectural, I'm not going to remember all the names. We had our first manufacturing, robotic-oriented people in the group. So it was a really nice ceremony. It was about a week and a half ago. And going to, and they also talked about where they're going to be going on to college. And so some are going to, one is deciding between Denison and OSU and the branch and COTC. And so most students, some were moving on to work, but most of them were moving on to higher education of some kind. So it was exciting. We also had a teacher nominated or awarded with the Leaders of Learning Award for the Licking County Foundation. She was the instructor in the medical assisting program. We've had several local sponsors donate in excess of $60,000 for the purpose of sponsoring manufacturing and industrial skill trades scholarships through CTEC's adult education. So specifically welding, multi-craft maintenance in general, and machining. And so we have a lot of interaction with the business community, and that's always increasing. We've had a number of students compete in their what's called the Skills USA competition, and 4 of them are going on to the national level competition, so that's exciting. We've had some good press in the Advocate recently, again, about partnerships with local businesses coming in and recruiting our students for apprenticeship type opportunities. So over the summer, juniors will be working in their trades, and then hopefully segueing that into employment post graduation. So,
Great.
okay. Just lots of sort of student award things happening in competitions and things like that. So.
Okay. Just a quick question about CTEC in general. It seems like as we look to the evolution of our own technology program at the high school, there might be a real opportunity to figure out what synergies there are or what guidance they can give us to kind of have a complete program. And I think we have a neat opportunity to change that over, and we'll talk about maybe that when the agenda item comes up. But there must be some way there to have a way to get together to leverage some of the great things that they have.
Because they have all that new robotic machining and robotics program that just started.
Right.
Is this the first or second? It's either the the first year.
Yeah.
So, and all new, brand new equipment because they're part of a, what was the grant that they, I think there's a consortium of 5 or 6.
Yeah. Straight A fund.
Straight A fund, thanks.
Yeah.
So there's,
That's
so
great.
I think that would be great. I'd love to take you to meet Joyce.
Yeah, that'd be fun. I'd
Yeah.
love to at some point.
That'd be great.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Katie?
I just wanted to put a plug in for the Newark Granville Community Authority. We are looking for up-and-coming new members who might like to run for a position. We have 4 positions that are up for election. We have one person who's come forward, a new person. We do not know yet if the current members are going to be running again. Have you heard?
Two of the four have sent me their intent of running again.
Okay. If you are interested, May 1st, you need to let Mike know with a letter of intent. The election is May the 18th here in the district building from 4 to 6, and only people who live in the community authority are eligible to run. So, there we go. And vote, yes.
Yes.
Great.
All right, that moves us to the action agenda. Okay, the first item is 10.01, a contracted service agreement for hearing impaired services.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions?
Katie, was that your second?
Mhm.
Okay.
I actually heard.
Wow, hey. I heard
Getting
something.
better.
Good for you.
Do you have
Yeah,
comments on
I just wanted to, because we've approved a contract for these services earlier in the year, and that person has not been able to meet the needs of our students, so we are contracting with Ms. Baker.
Any other questions? Take the roll, please.
Mr. Miller?
Aye?
Dr. Rentel?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Thank you. 10.02, unpaid leave of absence. We have one.
So moved?
May I have a second?
Second.
Any questions? Take the roll, please.
Mr. Miller?
Aye?
Dr. Rentel?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Okay. 10.03, we have a leave of absence.
So moved? I'll give that one to Amy.
Amy first.
And I'll second that.
Okay.
Take the roll, please.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Dr. Rentel?
Aye.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Okay. The next, we have a sabbatical leave request. Once we have a motion, I'll frame the discussion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. So, first of all, I'd like to remind the board that if we are going to be talking about a specific employee and we need to move into executive session, just to be cautious about what we say at what times. But in Article 13 of the collective bargaining agreement, teachers have the ability to request a sabbatical leave for professional growth. You received the request from a staff member, and I have placed this request on the board agenda for your consideration. To frame the conversation, our staff member is requesting a sabbatical leave for 1 year to obtain an APE endorsement, which is Adaptive Physical Education endorsement for her license, and to get an accreditation as an APE teacher, Adaptive Physical Education teacher. I believe you have the details that she submitted in her proposal, so I will entertain questions that I can answer publicly at this time. And you also have the sabbatical request leave
Yeah.
article in your packet.
Could you just, to the degree you can, explain, I guess, first of all, the adaptive physical education, how is that being covered at the moment?
Okay, so we currently contract with the ESC for some of those services, and then we also have a paid employee, Tara Parsley, who is our physical therapist who consults with our PE staff to address and modify, make accommodations for students that might need adaptive PE services. But if we don't meet it through those services, then we contract through the ESC. We generally spend anywhere from, depending on what student needs, we have anywhere from $3,000 to $8,000 a year on those services.
And I noticed in the proposal that there were some different places mentioned in this, and I was not quite sure how that fit together.
I want to be clear from the board's perspective that, the teacher has a current job assignment. For us, I can't make the commitment that if they receive this certification that we won't spend the money, because the likelihood of scheduling aligning is probably pretty slim. So I don't want to give the board a false impression that if the leave were granted, that expenditure would go away. We would probably still need to contract for that service because of scheduling. Does that make sense?
Because most of the needs are at a different building, or?
Well, yes and no. I think there are needs at the elementary level, intermediate level, middle, and high. But for the most part, APE is utilized for students that are in our MH units. And we have one at the high school, and we have one at the in elementary and intermediate.
So if I understand what you're saying, then currently, Tara Parsley and Educational Service Center floats where needed.
Correct.
And for someone to have this endorsement, that person would, am I making a logical assumption in assuming that they would be teaching a full schedule of PE classes,
Correct.
which would not necessarily allow them to float?
Right, but if they had students in their classroom
Sure,
that
they could serve the
benefit-
students
Correct.
that were in that class, but if that person is teaching, let's say, just half day in the middle school and half day in the intermediate school, the services needed in the high school or in GES wouldn't necessarily,
We would have to
we would still
contract.
have to have that floater.
Correct.
So it's almost coincidental that the person would have this endorsement? Would
And
that
be able to
fair
serve a
to
student in
say?
their classroom. I would say that's an accurate statement. If I think I understand what you're saying, that if a student happens to be on their course load or in their caseload,
Right.
then yes, the
But
staff
we
member
don't-
could
we
utilize
aren't-
that
At
and
current
provide that
staffing,
service.
the way the current staffing is organized, we don't have a dedicated person
Correct.
to do this in-house, and that would create a staffing issue,
Well-
because then we would have to hire someone to fill that position of performing the PE.
Right. And I think we've also been intentional in utilizing the service providers that we have on staff in physical therapy to collaborate and coordinate with our PE teachers. So that would, it would augment that service. But that person would still be doing that collaboration and coordination as well.
So we wouldn't, how much, I mean, you probably can't estimate, what would be the savings, if any, with this? I mean, the coincidental service would be some savings, but we would still be expending above and beyond anyway.
Correct. I want you, from a full transparency perspective, I don't want you to think that one would eliminate the other, because I just don't see that as a reality, looking at schedules. So I think that needs to be clear.
And with the information Mike just provided us earlier, and the relative unknown of those pieces, we don't have a lot of flexibility in setting aside a potential staffing piece that would be purely for adaptive purposes, other than what we're already contracting for, right?
Correct.
Because this is already something we have figured in our budget, is
Yes,
what I'm saying.
that's correct. That's correct.
Do you have any other?
Right. So the economics of understanding this sabbatical leave request is that the current contract supports a long-term sub in this position in place of the permanent. Is that
Correct.
long-term sub also a part of our medical plans, or?
Yes.
Okay.
We have to offer benefits to the sub because it's a year-long subbing position. But all of that is wrapped into, and Mike, you could probably
Yeah.
explain it better than I can, but it's total compensation minus total compensation, which is what the payout is.
So we wouldn't be paying the person who's on sabbatical a full salary and paying the sub a full salary.
Correct.
It's
Correct.
essentially the full salary plus with the associated benefits
For both of them,
are,
somehow
well,
integrated.
the sub are essentially credited against the salary and benefits of the person on sabbatical, so that from a pure cost standpoint, of the sabbatical itself, the person on sabbatical would actually just receive and pay the difference between what it costs to replace that person and that person's base, salary plus benefits, so.
So do they carry their benefits with them then on sabbatical?
They can,
Yes.
they can carry the benefits with them. Yes, the contract allows that.
At the same rate, or do they have to pay like a supplementary fee because they're not full, they're not receiving their full salary?
Generally, the
or-
way we have applied that in the past, that the last time we approved the sabbatical was that they were still eligible for our insurance, but the employee on sabbatical paid the full cost of it while on sabbatical.
And that was something that, if I recall, that was a contingent piece that wasn't in the original proposal of the person applying, is that correct? Didn't we?
I think we did tweak that when the
We
request was made.
tweaked that in our meeting,
Yeah.
correct? So that's the.
To make sure it was cost neutral to the
Yeah,
district.
right. Yeah.
And this one would be cost neutral to the district.
At this point, it would be cost neutral.
Yes,
Including the benefits and things because they're credited against the salary that you would otherwise
correct.
be paying.
Yeah, from a pure cost standpoint of the
Right.
sabbatical, it's cost neutral.
Depending on who you
Who-
hired to fill
yeah.
it, right?
Yeah, I mean,
If you were to hire someone
the-
at a lower
Right.
salary, there would be a
Correct.
significant
The amount of
savings
salary that the person on sabbatical leave gets is really contingent upon the replacement that we put in place
Right.
and what we need to pay them in order to.
Right.
you
But we
know.
wouldn't realize any cost savings from a lower salary if we were to hire